Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY, called Contact Procedures Volume 8 Chapter 8. Written by MeatFcker. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. TAF Dewdrop. A reminder to all ships that the Walter Protocol is in full effect. Any ships found in violation shall be destroyed without warning. Please restrict all transmissions to tight beam. The deep, commanding voice on the radio announcer stabbed into Tweety's skull and jolted him awake. 3 of his eyes struggled to open, the 4th refused to budge. He lifted a grasping arm up to it, but the claw scraped against the bandage before it found an eyelid. That wasn't good. He let an exhausted limb flop back down into the softness of the mattress. Tweety could just make out the beeping of the vitals monitor over the drone of the radio. His vitals monitor, probably. It inched his way around trying to scan the room, and managed to flop it over to the one side. Rusty, Galloway's massive German shepherd, was curled up in the corner of the room, and Flaring was working on a small desk nearby. The Nidgee's back was turned. Tweety tried to call the medic's name, but all that came out was a soft wheeze of air. That wasn't a problem, he could just walk over there. He felt like he could do anything, really. Squadron rosters have gone out to all ship captains. If your vessel has not received an assignment, immediately contact the Admiralty's desk using the priority band. Please note that unauthorized use of the priority band is punishable by up to... He heard the beeping of the vital monitor spike as he heaved the 4 legs over the side of the bed. He couldn't seem to get them to untangle, but that wasn't something to worry about. Standing up seemed to be a lot more important. A dog barked, but it sounded distant and weak. He pushed himself off the bed as his legs gave away, his face slamming into the floor. Too late, he noticed that Flaring was already turning, the feathers on his crest rising in alarm. Rusty gently poked at Tweety's spiraling form with his nose. "Jenkins," called the Nidgee, "get in here. I need you." Though casualties are high, we have not been defeated. We would like to take a moment to honor the sacrifices of the brave men, women, and aliens who... The door hissed open and Tweety saw Jenkins' hulking silhouette rush through. The Nidgee slipped back into unconsciousness. Arc 205 have given their lives today. Based upon traffic logs and the black box reports from the home fleet, the office of the chair has posthumously awarded the Unification Cross to... Spook bounced happily on the smaller of the cabin's 2 beds, pushing off from the low ceiling at the peak of every jump. The cub seemed immune to her parents' worries and the steady drone of the radio announcer. "We'll have to leave the rifles," said Webb. "No way we'll get them signed out discreetly." "We could still get them later," said Lael offhandedly, her gaze flicking rapidly between the 3 screens she laid out on the table in front of her. "Sure hope so," replied Webb. "That pulse rifle of mine's a work of art. Cost a whole month's worth of fab time. Won't do you much good if you're languishing in a martial prison. Master Warrant Officer Caleb Walt, for conspicuous gallantry and bravery. Master Warrant Officer Walt's actions allowed for the successful launch of the Arx-class transport, saving upwards of 20,000 lives." Lael glanced up from the screens and fixed Webb with a stare. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Webb's ears crossed into a frown. "Right thing? What do you mean by that? Leaking those documents and fleeing Earth? If we hadn't leaked the files, a lot more people would be dead. And then what else could we have done? Got in the way, one of the militia crews running an AA battery died in one of the city's bunkers, hopped onto an evac slab and cowered beneath the waves. We could have fought for our home, instead of we curled up our tails and ran. If we'd stayed, we'd be dead. Spook would be dead. We didn't have a choice." "I guess," Lael turned back to her screens. "Still feels wrong, though." Privately, Webb agreed. They'd made a life in Vancouver, and they'd left friends behind. Although he didn't want to add any more fuel to Lael's doubts, the conversation died. The drone of the radio and the rhythmic slap of Spick's paws against the ceiling was the only sound in the small cabin. Corporal Oddclaw swooping wings of the conspicuous gallantry for bravery. Despite losing a wing to an enemy pulse dart, the Nidgee Corporal continued to hold the entrance of the London nuclear silo against sustained enemy assault. "Found him," said Lael. "TAF Dewdrop, one of the last ships of Earth." "That's what Galloway ended up naming his yacht?" asked Webb. "I wouldn't have thought that he'd gone for something more warlike." "The yacht is an old, partially decommissioned grasshopper. It doesn't need a tough-sounding name to earn the mechanismo. Fair enough. I guess you make contact. Yep, we'll be heading there shortly. TAV Dewdrop. It was silent in the Dewdrop's cramped shuttle bay. Galloway had turned the radio off when the citations had started. "We're going to return to the council," said Alderster Fields. "It is necessary for us to bring our full weight to bear as a counterweight against the chair." "I'll be going too," said Twisted. "I'm not passing off Mottle's guard until I thoroughly vetted my replacement. And I'm still a little choked that the marshal left us for dead in Chicago." "Fair enough," said Galloway. "We can link up once again once things have started to settle back down. But before you go, I have a favor to ask of you. I've found her, really." He turned to the marshal. "Think you're up for a quick extract before you go? How much crap will this land me in?" "Well, if it goes well, none. And when it doesn't," Galloway shrugged, "it won't be the most treasonous thing that I've had part in today." "Frick it," said Fada. "I owe you guys. My outfit has been crapping on me for years. Count me in." Galloway smiled. "Wonderful! Now it just so happens that we've misplaced two close friends of mine. You're going to help them get back." TAV Dewdrop. Sub-Lieutenant Stacy Carter, for conspicuous gallantry with bravery, 5 times Sub-Lieutenant Carter piloted a shuttle into the besieged urban areas, evacuating upwards of 2,000. Tweety leaned heavily on the flaring as he bobbled over to the operations room's one large table, Rusty following closely behind. Cromley was seated in a far end of the table, his fingers shopping awkwardly at the old-fashioned keyboard. Tweety collapsed into the chair near the wiry man. "You still can't use the implants?" asked Tweety. "No," said Cromley, "and working without them is a damn pain. I should have remembered the first rule of Navint." Flaring settled himself down in the seat across from Tweety. When Cromley didn't continue, he broke the silence. "Care to enlighten us? Never tell anyone you're Navint. You'll forget what free time means within a week." Tweety let out a weak cough of amusement. "You at least making progress?" "Some. It's hard without an open net to listen in on. Have to fight for space with the tight beam network." "What you've got so far?" Cromley leaned back with a sigh. "Earth's gone. We got some people off with the arcs, and we hit some of them in the oceans, but every major metropolitan center's glass. Rest of the surface is crawling with replicators. Mars is a lost cause. There's still volunteer squads maintaining the AA, but the rest of the population's pulled out of the cities and into the catacombs. 1 billion people crammed into shelters meant for half of that. The belt is a little different. Most of those installations still run with a full emissions discipline, so there's only the odd packet of replicators drifting towards them. Nothing rushed, though. The smaller settlements should be able to play cat and mouse for quite some time. The bigger ones, Ganymede, Eros, and the like, have already joined us around the Hespeistus. Lieutenant George Slater, for conspicuous gallantry and bravery. Lieutenant Slater led the last defense of the TAF Redoubtable's reactor core and manually triggered an improvised explosive device to deny replicators ground. This is Lieutenant Slater's second unification cross. The first... "Crap," breathed Tweety. "I thought he was stationed on the Hef." "Guess not," said Cromley. "Wasn't he the ERT who got his first cross in Askra? How'd you know him?" "Lotus Station. Got mixed up with the fighting with me and Jenkins." Tweety twitched his crest up into a weak grin. "Always did have a flair for the heroic." "Damn shame," said Flaring. "Agreed," said Cromley as he reached over and flicked the radio. "But we can't afford to mourn now. There's work to do." The room fell silent, with only the clack of Cromley's awkward typing staving off total silence. Tweety slumped in his chair with his head down. Flaring fidgeted. "We're going back on active then?" asked Flaring. "Only news I've gotten is the fleet radio." "No, we're not," said Cromley. "The only concentrated 1st and 4th SOR. Hell, even what's left of our second company got shut down. What's left of the pie isn't big enough for everyone to get a slice. And we're not needed." "Makes sense, I guess," said Flaring. "Limited resources, counterinsurgency, and EVA could come in handy." "Jenkins must be excited about that," said Tweety, glancing up at Flaring. "Means he gets to hang out with us for a bit longer." Him and Walsh took one of the shuttles over to our new antiquated sister ship, the HFY McKenna. Ship so goddamn ancient that nobody bothered to update the registry after contact. Sister ship? Some Navy puke decided that 2 lightly armed civvy yachts was worth about as much as an FAC. We got paired off an hour ago. I didn't realize that we were short on warships. We're hurting for a lot more than that. HFY McKenna. Walsh had pulled up short and started through the open door. "Is that a goat?" she asked. "Yep," said Mance, the ship's engineer. "Captain's goat. Billy, nice fella." Jenkins took a few steps back and peered through the door. It was indeed a goat. Slightly curled horns, mouthy steadily munching on cud, and a bored glaze over its elongated face. It swallowed. "Bleed," said the goat. "He don't like me much," said Mance. When it became obvious that the surly crewman wasn't about to explain any further, Jenkins turned away to the oddly hypnotic animal that struck out on the bridge. The tour was just kept getting better. They'd stepped out of the shuttle into the leaky hangar. Literally, the hiss had been audible, and the hood of Jenkins' skin suit had slammed shut as soon as it detected a steady loss of pressure. Their guides, a tall bastard named Casey, and the small blob of man that was now Mance, hadn't seemed concerned. "Welcome to the McKenna," Casey had said. "I'm Casey, and this is Mance. My sincerest apologies for the state of our hangar. We took a micromedia hit a few days back, and haven't had a chance to get it fixed. We'll have to continue this in the corridors." Casey had been convincing. Jenkins would have believed him if Walsh hadn't tagged 3 smuggling compartments on his helmet's HUD before they left the hangar. It was at this point that he'd insisted, over Casey's vocal objections, that Mance silent glare on a full tour of the ship. The corridors had been a mess, an endless maze of unlabeled intersections and sudden dead ends. It seemed designed to assault Jenkins' sense of direction. It didn't help that the stench of cheap booze had besieged his sense of smell the minute that he dropped his helmet. He'd barely kept his bearings. They'd seen the messy but functional engineering deck, the grimy porthole that was in the ship's only real window, and the pigsty that passed for the McKenna's crew quarters before losing Casey to a game of poker and a fresh bottle of vodka. The tour had gotten a lot quieter with Mance leading. The surly engineer hadn't said a word until they'd stumbled across the goat. Jenkins slowed to let Mance overtake him. No use letting the pudgy bastard in on the fact that he didn't know where the bridge was. "Is this captain of yours nice?" Walsh asked. No response, although Jenkins cracked a smile. Mance took the right turn. "You've been a spacer for a while," she tried. Still nothing. For reasons unknown to Jenkins, Mance took another right at the next intersection. "Got a last name?" Not a peep. Jenkins chuckled at Walsh's increasingly desperate attempts to conversation, and Mance turned right again. "Don't see what's so funny," said Mance, his hand slapped against the panel, and he turned and marched off. "Chatty fellow," muttered Walsh. Jenkins stepped through the door and gagged. He could taste the stench. He heard Walsh deploy her helmet. That was a good idea. He fumbled for the neck button and popped his own. "This definitely isn't the bridge," said Jenkins. "Meh," said the goat. Both humans turned to look at Billy, who forced his way between them and sauntered into the room. He nudged the discarded can upright and with his nose and started licking out the contents. "A trash compactor?" Walsh asked. "Do we still build ships with these? And are they supposed to get this full?" "It's probably broken," said Jenkins. "Every pre-contact standards, this bucket is ancient. I can't believe anyone bothered to retrofit it with impellers. Did you see which way Mance went? My eyes were too busy tearing up." "Wonderful. Looks like we're tracking the bridge down on our own. Helmets up?" "Helmets up," agreed Walsh. "I'll lead the way. Come on, Billy. That can looks gross." The goat trotted after them. Arc 205. Webb absently scooped up Skip in mid-bounce and settled onto her lap. The cub squirmed a bit, trying to return to her fun, but Lael was already smoothing down the covers and repositioning the pillow. The rest of the room was already spotless. You never know that they'd sheltered in it for past half day. "So who's this founder that we're waiting for anyways?" asked Webb. "A marshal," said Lael, "and an angry one at that. Got left out in the rain after the replicators hit Chicago. Seems the marshals forgot to pick him up in the Aldister Fields." Webb curled his ears in contempt. "Sure. Forgot. We still might not be able to trust him," said Lael. "Those loyalty screenings are thorough. Dreg flunked out of the test after the first round, and I prepped him for better than part of a month." "Wait, you prepped him? How come I never heard about that?" "This was a little on the clandestine side for you. Makes it easier for you to lead the Freed Pack without knowing them. For the last time, I don't lead. I'm out as soon as we picked up the chief. Nobody but you will be nominated, and you know it. If you just perk up the ears and—" The door hissed out, and a short human, Webb must have been 2 feet taller, stepped through. The man looked like he'd been through hell. His face was a mess of blotchy red patches of raw skin, and his eyes were bandaged shut. "Wep?" he asked. "Founder," replied Wep. The man nodded. "Good. Let's go." They made an odd procession, the four of them. Founder led the way, his marshal's uniform clearing the path through the corridors more effectively than any gun. Spick trailed after him, making the odd swipe at his sidearm, and Lael walked a few steps behind, ears low with anxiety. Webb brought up the rear. Both adult Nectra wore unlocked cuffs behind their backs. He would have killed to trade them for a rifle. They dodged left and right, avoiding the main passageways and the two-man marshal patrols that walked the halls. They took the maintenance hatch down to the 2 levels to the shuttle docks. Then they bumped into another human. She was a young marshal private, with MP markings rather than dreaded special investigation insignia. That was good. She looked crisp enough to be fresh from training. It normally only took a few months for a marshal to realize that they were all but immune to the typical military bullcrap. She also didn't seem confident enough to challenge Founder on his raw skin or his eye patch. Still recognizing Weapon Lael, though, Founder pulled up short as she snapped off a salute, which he promptly returned. "Sir," she said, "may I help transport your prisoners?" Webb caught his breath, and he saw the Lael hand crept towards the knife tucked in her back. He could picture his own knife and hold-out blaster strapped underneath his shirt, and mentally played out the scene in his head. Lael would step past Spick, cut Founder's throat, and shift the dying man out of the way to give Webb a clear shot to the woman. It would be loud, messy, and probably blow the chance of escape, but he couldn't picture any other way. He relaxed as the human escort's next words. "That won't be necessary, Private," replied Founder. "If I wanted to make a scene, I'd have broken out the power armor and pulse rifles. The last thing we need right now is a rile-up in public. But, sir, I can handle 2 unarmed prisoners and a kid myself. What I need you to do is run interference. Even if these 2 came willingly, there's some 200 Nectra on this ark who might still have objections. Forceful objections. Keep their attention away from the shuttle bay until I'm on my way." "Understood, sir." She turned to go, and Webb breathed out a sigh of relief. That had been close. Lael's hand shifted away from the hilt of a knife. They reached the shuttle bay without further incident, and Founder guided them towards an unassuming-looking craft parked in the corner. Webb winced a bit at the sight. Once inside, he'd have to bend double to keep his head from banging against the ceiling. "This is where I leave you," said the Founder. "Tell Galloway that we're even." "Of course," said Lael. Webb gave him a nod of his own. Founder left without another word. Lael palmed the ship's hatch and shepherded Spick in. She turned to Webb. "Mind if I drive? Have you ever flown anything larger than an Ariskimmer?" "No, have you?" Webb sighed. "No. Let's hope that there's a decent autopilot." HFY McKenna. Jenkins trailed after Walsh onto the bridge, the actual bridge this time, not the busted trash compactor heap of the goat crap. Smelled like alcohol instead of rotting meat. Everyone's got their own way of coping, thought Jenkins, although some are definitely worse than others. It looked as if someone had scattered stations throughout the empty room at random. None of the terminals faced the same direction, and Jenkins couldn't pick out anything that looked like the captain's chair, or an external display for that matter. Only the 3 men working inside assured Jenkins that they had found the bridge. 2 of them were hunched over a single station, arguing in low voices. He thought that he caught words slip away and exit vector, but it was hard to tell. Their backs were turned, the 3rd man leaning against the far bulkhead. He was unmistakably the ship's captain. Jenkins immediately hated him. The balding human had squeezed his immense gut into a fleet captain's mess jacket. Not the whole uniform, though, just the jacket. He'd swapped out the rest of the ensemble for a pair of mismatched dress pants and aging leather combat boots, and a stained wife-beater with visible beneath the unbuttoned coat. "Welcome," bellowed the captain. "I see you found your way here. What happened to your guides? I trust that you didn't wander too far." "Walked off," said Jenkins. Then, for fun, he added, "You the captain?" The man frowned. "You wound me, sir. Do I need to fetch my cap?" "That won't be necessary. I think I've got you figured out now." "Excellent. Well, in that case, I'm Charles, and I own and operate the McKenna. The 2 confused-looking gentlemen are Liam and Finnegan. Liam and Finnegan." Welsh snorted. "Sure he is. Hey, Finnegan!" There was an awkward pause before the 2nd man turned his head and let out a tentative, "Me?" Charles sighed. "It's so hard to find good help these days. His name is Fingers. Harmless bit of fun, really, on account that he's card-dealing shenanigans. But I didn't think you military types would look too kindly on it. Jenkins leaned back against the bulkhead and savored the ensuing silence. Walsh wandered over to the two puzzled crewmen and started reading the display. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit anyways? Asked Charles. I would have thought that myself and your captain could have made our introductions remotely. We tried, said Walsh. Your typing comms packet is shot. Galloway sent us instead. Charles wrung his hands. Is it now? I'll get Mance on that post-haste. Thank you for carrying that message. I can show you back to the shuttle now. Nah, said Jenkins. I've decided that we're staying put. He dropped into the chair, and satisfied that he could watch both the door and the room's 3 occupants, threw his feet up over the nearby console. The screen was cracked. He didn't think that it'd be in the way. Walsh, you may want to grab a seat. T.A.V. Dewdrop. Master Corporal Gregory Hammond, for conspicuous gallantry and bravery. Master Corporal Hammond refused evacuation and continued to work to free trapped members of his platoon while replicated forces advanced on his position. His actions saved the lives of 3. Rusty's massive head rested on Tweety's leg. The dog's weight was oddly comforting. So we've got 5 full-strength dreadnoughts and a couple dozen FACs, said Tweety. That's all we had in the hef. Something like that, said Cromley. There's another 15 hulls that we can take with us. 6 of them are shiny new Redoubtable class supers, but they're running on skeleton crews and incomplete systems. We're leaving another 23 in the dry docks. At least we'll get some of them out, Tweety paused. Wait, take them with us? To where? Full evac through space. Is that even possible? What's left of the Admiralty seems to think so. Most of the replicator swarm moved on from the gate, and we've got enough capital ships to punch a hole. What do we do from there, though? We can't hope to rebuild without the shipyards, and we can't exactly take the Hephaestus with us. Not the main ones, no, but some of the smaller fabbers and the refinery modules could be hauled by tug. The station's already in pieces. Frick, I was out for longer than I thought. T.A.V. Dewdrop. Webb relaxed his death grip on the seat of the shuttle autopilot, touched him down inside the dewdrop. Lael had been eyeing the manual controls for far too much interest during their brief jaunt through space. He rose from his seat and banged his head on the 4-man craft's low ceiling, and then shuffled over to the hatch. Spook bounced happily at the craft into the dewdrop shuttle bay. I could have done that just as well as the computer, complained Lael. It didn't look that hard. The computer plotted a course through more than 4,000 ships, then executed it flawlessly, said Webb. I'd call that pretty hard. You're no fun. I know. Galloway was waiting for them in the shuttle bay. He scooped up Spook in a hug and twirled her around, ignoring the cub's painful shrieks, then dropped her off onto the ground and walked over to her parents. Spook landed with a practiced roll. You guys cut rather close, he said. Had to be careful, said Lael. Never can tell who you can trust these days. How'd you turn that marshal anyways? I saw that he was wearing CPO's shield. He got wrecked over in Chicago. Someone in his chain must have decided that the invasion would be convenient time to lose their 2 most troublesome counselors. We got him out instead. That ought to do it, said Webb. The close protection guys are cut above the regular marshals. Where's everyone, by the way? You guys from 3rd don't normally skimp on your receptions this much. The Admiralty just passed the final movement orders. Rest of the crew's on the bridge awaiting the signal. Care to join us? Nah, said Webb. I've got to make sure Spook's settled. Don't let her boundless energy fool you. She hasn't slept in a day and a half. I'll come, said Lael. It is his turn to cubsit anyway. HFY McKenna. One of the consoles in the far corner let out a sharp ringing sound. Out of all the McKenna's crew, only Buddy seemed the least bit interested, and his interest only extended as far as to be slightly raised his head. He was too busy munching cud in the corner. Jenkins eased himself to his feet and walked over. The station was running an outdated comms package. He accepted the call with a sigh. Galloway's face sprang to life on the display. Jenkins smiled and then dialed the volume down. Jenkins, asked the aging NCO, how long are you planning on staying over there? Whole trip, replied Jenkins. I'm not sure that they won't scuttle off the minute things get hot. I'm not sure that that'll make much of a difference, said Galloway. That aging piece of crap won't be able to be much in a fight. Its turret barely qualifies as a weapon. Jenkins saw Charles stiffen at the corner of his eye. That was interesting. The marshal still hadn't distributed the evacuation packages for the implants, which meant that the McKenna captain should have been running blind. We've got our escort assignment, continued Galloway. Half a dozen unarmed, overcrowded civvy ships, plus one of Hef's smelter faber modules. Clock in at a little over 400 souls. And it's just the dewdrop and the McKenna on escort. Yep, we're going to have to punch above our weight class. I'm sure you're looking forward to that. When do we strike out? Final plans go out in 7 minutes, said Galloway. 7 minutes? You used to be able to call warning orders a week in advance. How fricked is the Admiralty if you're only working on 10 minutes ahead? Galloway grimaced. It's pretty bad. Zhao, Marcos, and Son are missing, presumed dead, and Karmazov of the Brock are the stalemate. If it weren't for the chair's orders, we'd be dead in the water. Oh, thank God the system works. Anything else? There is one thing. Galloway hesitated, indecision plain in his face. Have you been following the radio updates? No. They're not playing them over here. Some bullcrap about a tight beam array. Why? What came up? It's Slater. Another pause, longer this time. It was part of the inspection tour on the Redoubtable, helping revise the SOPs on some of the ship's new systems. The black box made it out untouched. Galloway's voice was hoarse. Bastard made a hero out of himself. Again. Went down fighting. Jenkins' fist slammed into the top of the console, sending a spiderweb of cracks down the screen. Oddly enough, Slater was the first loss of the day that really hit him. His mother had been dead for some time, and his father was safely escorted in the upper reaches of the fleet. The rest of his friends were military, and there were certain risks that came with the job. But Slater had been all but retired, working a cushy R&D gig. He should have been waiting for him on the Hef. Thank you for letting me know, said Jenkins. He closed the connection and turned to the crew, blood dripping from his clenched fist. Right, he said. Here's how things are going to work. Charles, you are going to stop playing games. You're a smuggler. Big whoop. Those implants of yours are a direct violation of the chair edict. I don't give a frick. What matters is that each and every one of you swore an oath when you got your spaces tickets. Your fleet, auxiliaries, and if you even think about shirking your duty, I will kill you. Painfully. Understood? Charles managed a frantic, pale-faced nod, fingers gave a slack-jawed stare, and Liam tapped a few hasty commands on his terminal. Even Walsh looked a little surprised. Only Billy seemed oblivious to the murderous edge on Jenkins's voice. Jenkins settled himself back into his seat, feet up on the broken screen, checking his sidearm fully charged. Good. He glanced up. What are you waiting for? 6 minutes until the fleet moves out. Look busy. T.A.V. Dewdrop. The Dewdrop's crammed bridge was stuffed full. Galloway sat rigid at the helm. Flaring manned the nav console, and Cromley at tack. Tweety was slumped into the chair at the comm station. Rusty had wedged himself in next to the recovering Neji. Naomi and Lael lurked in the hatchway. All ships, droned the radio. It's time. Your captains have already received their orders. They are to execute them immediately. All broadcasts will cease once the tight beam network is broken. Stand by to receive direct communications from your squadron leaders. The thousands of surviving Terran ships were clustered close enough to be visible to the naked eye. Small personal vessels of Marshal Hunter-Killer ships skimmed over the surface of the massive Ark-class transports. Colossal tugs and haulers blocked out the stars. Everywhere Tweety looked, he could see the telltale shimmer of idling impeller nacelles. The scavenged bones of the TAS Hesviestus drifted in the edge of the formation. The cavernous dry docks little more than frail eggshells without its hundreds of support modules. Tweety smiled grimly at the thought of hundreds scuttling charges that fleet engineers had left behind. If the compact tried to pick through Sol's remains, they were in for a surprise. In the distance, Mars' lights glowed with a bright red. Tweety shuddered at the thought of the beautiful rock planet. His home, crawling with replicators, and the image of millions of refugees fleeing into the tunnels cut deep beneath the regolith, and the memory of Earth's besieged cities, flinging their defiance into the sky with their last breaths. They'd come back. If Tweety could fall in love with the system in only a few short years, he couldn't imagine how attached the humans must have grown over the millennia. He hoped that there would be something left when they returned. Across the solar system lay the gate, and around the gate waited swarms of replicators. Tweety had no doubt that the Terran patchwork fleet would break through. There were humans at the helm, after all. But anything could lay beyond the gate. Was the second fleet still standing guard over the Midway system? were the replicators there as well, laying in wait. The hell was the Galactic Compact? When would they show up and sink their teeth into the Terran's exposed heart? Navigation, asked Galloway. Course plotted and awaiting execution, said Blaring. TAC, all weapons green, said Cromley. Comms, we just received an update timing, said Tweety. 35 seconds to burn. Thank you, Tweety. Anyone ready with a speech? Of course not. Jenkins isn't here. Guess you guys have to settle for a few words from me then. The Dewdrop's captain sucked in a breath. This isn't the end. One day, we're gonna come back home. 4,000 Terran ships flared their impellers and struck out. They sailed towards the replicators, towards the gate, towards the unknown. End of chapter.